Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? If so, here's your sign. I'm Sarah Heater, the host of Big Brave Business, and I also own a podcast production and strategic consultation company called PodFox Media. My team offers a 100% free strategy session that is completely private between you or you and your co-host and one of our industry-leading specialists. We'll tell you everything about podcasting today, the market, what it takes to get started, and all the ways your podcast could look. And there's even time for you to ask any questions you have about podcasting. If that sounds like something that you need to do because starting a podcast has been on your list for months or even years, book your call today. Again, 100% free. launchmyshow.com. That's launchmyshow.com. Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heater, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. If you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I am going to open this conversation with our big question of the week. But first, I think it's really important to have the context of who you're hearing, whose voices are on the call today. And this is, if you're new, if this is your first Big Brave Business episode, Season 3, we're doing these small group discussions, and they've been so fun. And today's gonna be a little different because I think we've spent a lot of time in this kind of justice oriented, but how do we do better by people? And I have a feeling that's still always going to come up because it always does come back to that, doesn't it? But we're going to talk more but doing actual business today. And I'm looking forward to that. So without further ado, let's do some introductions. I'm your host, Sarah Heater. I host the podcast Big Brave Business. And I also run a podcast production and strategic consultation company called PodFox.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Silver. I'm the data whisperer for founders and dig into all those dusty Google spreadsheets to find you the money you're leaving on the table.
Hi, I'm Misa Bacon, and I'm the founder of Perfectly Kept Books. So I am a bookkeeper, and I provide empowering bookkeeping services for small businesses and creatives.
So I'm Michaela. I am the mom behind the Comma Mama Co., and I am an SEO strategist and blog content writer, and I help, I would say, founders and entrepreneurs become kind of a social media optional and have an organic version of traffic.
Emily Adams, co-founder of Transformative Leadership, and we do operations and leadership consulting.
I love this. So today we are going to be talking about the big question: how can data-driven decision-making be used ethically in business without losing intuition and values?
I mean, I'm a talker, so I'm going to dive right in. So for everyone who's listening, just some context, I have pretty severe ADHD. I'm very open about that. So if I jump tangents, I will always bring it back, I promise. But here's the thing. As an ex-corporate data analyst for over 10 years in corporate analytics, numbers can just be that. They can become just numbers, and they really don't have a lot of meaning. And I think what you're going to hear today from all the amazing people that are on here is that numbers need context. And what I always tell my clients is numbers are like the first chapters in a story of the story of your business. And you get to write the ending, but you have to understand what story the numbers are telling you before you can figure out how to write that ending. And so for all of our clients, everyone who's on here, numbers need context, and they need that intuition to, first of all, see them in a way that's going to be applicable for your business, but also understand them from a privilege perspective, from a disability perspective, from an accessibility perspective. In my line of work, it's always from a trauma-informed perspective, and just from an intellectual perspective.
I love that you opened this with storytelling, because that's exactly what I love about data. Is I love leveraging data to tell a story. And I shared with the group before we hit record that my background is in operations, but as a CEO, I find like the operations side to actually be a lot harder to do both, like kind of the visionary leadership and like the manifestation of what you want your business to be. And also the operations part, you really like need to leverage delegating some things, but I do love the storytelling of data, and it's one of my favorite things to work on for clients. And I find that for myself as a CEO, and I try to do this for my clients as well, when looking at their kind of podcast performance, I actually find that I build confidence looking at the numbers. So it's one thing to tell myself a story from my intuition on any given day, but that's just based on how I feel that day. So it can also be a roller coaster, but the data doesn't lie. So when I need the reassurance that, like, hey, you want proof that you actually know what you're doing, you can find it in the numbers. And that is really helpful.
This is right up my alley because this is why I am so passionate about not just doing the bookkeeping, but letting business owners know why it's important. Because a lot of times I hear, oh, well, yeah, I'll do my bookkeeping for taxes or I'll get to it later. And I'm like, well, how are you running your business if you are never looking at your numbers? And it's two sides of it because not everyone loves numbers like I do, but understanding what those numbers mean, what they are, and also understanding where you're coming from just as an individual, because we all have our own emotions and things tied to numbers. When you put it together, it's going to help you be more successful in your business because now you have real numbers to work with, not some conceptual thing that someone said, oh, yeah, 6 figures, that's it. It's no, what do you need? What do you need personally? What do you need to survive? And can your business support that? Are you providing a service that's not making any money? Your numbers will tell you. And that's why I encourage people to do it because when they do and they sit back and they're like, ooh, that, okay, that's not working. I need to shift gears. I need to do something different. And that's what I love to see is when they actually understand these numbers do mean something and I need to do something with them.
I think that's a great point. And it's interesting. We've had several small business clients where we lead them through like a business strategy and they're like, oh, we only want to hit like 150K, right? That's the number, that's the data that they're looking for. But then when we lead them through this intuition process of listening to their body actually tells us that they want to like make 500K. They want to make bigger money. But then when we bring them back in and ask, like, where's their mindset at? It's still at 50K. So when we look at numbers in that way, and you're seeing it from like a data perspective, like this is what my brain's telling me, this is what my body's telling me, and now this is the number that I'm at. Now you can take that data and know where you need to do your work at. It may not be your mindset, it may be in the capacity of your body. And as I think Kelsey had mentioned with the trauma piece, there may be some underlying issues to get to before you can actually make those decisions. So it's really cool to be having this conversation.
I almost feel like I come from the outside of we're so in our business where we've been talking about these data points in our business, but I often with doing like research for clients and finding those keywords specifically, or even just looking at analytics outside to see engage, it's just noticing how weaponized some statistics and data has really become for us to bring into our own stuff. For example, like a lot of people in the SEO industry love to gather these different things and say like, this is what our survey is saying, but they don't give context. They're pulling from everywhere. And whereas it's not applicable anymore. And it just almost is, I don't want to say fear mongering, but sometimes it turns into that when they're consistently creating this content saying, this is how you need to do this in your business. And then this is our statistics showing why, but not giving like any context. Like this might not actually be for your industry, or it might not actually be for you. This probably has nothing to do with you. And then they never address those pain points, but they're making money because people are believing their statistics and they're really attaching to business owners who don't know. And so we bring this into our business and then we're like, well, why is this not working for us? And then it affects our income, our services, how we look at our business in general. What is our marketing? What is our finances? And just creates these almost barriers for ourselves. So we just beat ourselves down. I just thought that was one more point.
I don't know if you're listening to this, you did not see my visceral reaction to what Michaela just said. I kind of hopped out of my seat because the weaponization of data, regardless of, I happen to know very much the podcast I'm on right now, so I'm going to say it, the political climate that we are in, the world order that we are in, but also in our own individual personal lives, data has been weaponized. Numbers have been weaponized, but particularly numbers that have no context.
Okay.
And for the purposes of this conversation, when I do my VIP days with my clients, it's an intimate process. They're hands off most of the day, but I need to understand what your business is like, because a lot of the numbers I end up surfacing, they're customer behavior. They're a deeper level than conversion rate, than page views, than sort of these things that are used as we'll have a data date, right? You hear that all over the place, have a data date. But if you don't know what data you're supposed to be looking at, you could be consistently re-traumatizing yourself and weaponizing your data against yourself. Sarah, you were saying earlier that you build confidence from data. That's beautiful. You're coming at it from a positive mindset. But there's a whole heck of a lot of founders out there who are not coming at it from a positive place. They're coming at it from the burnt out, gifted, talented kid sort of everything is telling me how wrong I am place. And they're going to see any data as negative, as telling them what's wrong with their business, as telling them where they've failed. And so looking at data really takes a lesson, like you were saying, Emily, a lesson in self-discovery to identify how you're going to approach your data from a positive place, from a growth place, and from a confidence place, like you were saying earlier, Sarah.
I think this is so, so important. And I just immediately love all of you for taking the conversation here right away, because this is, I think, really the essence of what I mean when I say big, brave business, right? And is really being big and brave. And I want to kind of echo something that I said earlier in the context of all of this that you have added, which is this is part of where having someone else in your corner on your team, whether you have the funds, what you have a big enough business that this is a priority to hire in someone, or whether you have a really good friend and you are accountability partners to each other when it comes to data, because I think sometimes that is part of what is helpful in having someone do it for you, looking at data and then being able to bring data to you to say like, hey, let's look at this together, instead of you sitting down in front of numbers and traumatizing yourself and then being alone in that moment as well of sitting in your trauma. And I think that for my clients, one of the things that I'm always trying to do, because I know with podcasting in particular, especially for people who have any experience with content creation on social media, it's like a numbers shock to start a podcast because the reach is just completely different. So if you think it's disheartening to post a reel and get 1,000 views, don't start a podcast. But I think that your relationship with numbers, so often, if you don't have some either a background in it or someone telling you a story in the numbers, the story you're telling yourself is what you're going to see, because you can always find data that's going to support the hypothesis that you're looking for. And so I think when I say it gives me confidence, I think that's because that's what I go to it for. I go to it looking for confidence. So I'm like looking for the evidence that things are going to be okay, that things are better than I think they are, that we're making progress, right? And then I also try to do that for my clients to be able to say, okay, I know you can log in and look at the same data dashboard. We're looking at the same numbers, but let me tell you what I see. And this is the story that I see, that you can't necessarily see the forest for the trees because you are experiencing your own frame of reference, your own perspective, and coming at it with that lived experience that may include either big T trauma, little T trauma, whatever your relationship is with showing up with these numbers right now, right? So yeah.
I also think that it's very interesting because I've just being a business owner, it's interesting to see which numbers trigger me and why. So I always look at, okay, this data is telling me X, Y, Z, but what's it triggering? High performer, super independent. Like, I'm just like, oh, it makes me feel like I'm not performing as well. Well, that comes then from some expectations and then from childhood. So you can use the numbers as growth You can use them for if you have the tools to work through that, or like you said, the support to help you get through that. And then there's on the flip side, some of the business owners that are like, yeah, I don't want to set any goals, or I don't want to set any of this data, so I don't have to look at it. So then that's kind of the avoidance side, right? So it's interesting to see that because I've played with both sides, and I have a business partner that keeps me very grounded in the center side to be able to actually look at the data. So it's very helpful to have that in the business.
I think it's very interesting how, well, one, we kind of forget as business owners that we've created a business for a reason. And part of that reason is because we want to do things differently. If we didn't want to do it differently, why start the business? And a lot of times we have so many aspirations and things that we want to do with the business. And we fail to pay attention to the numbers. But the numbers, it's the foundation of the business. It doesn't matter how big or small you want your business to be, you're going to need to know the numbers. And I know a lot of people also have a lot of feelings about making money, but it's like, that's why you created a business. And if you really want to have impact and do things with your business, the business has to make money, but you also have to know where you're starting. And most of us, if we're not looking at the numbers, we don't know where we are. And you can't go forward without knowing where you're starting from. And so, one thing that I like to do is really help to educate the business owners on what are these numbers? Why am I looking at it? Why is it important? Why do I not want to wait until tax season? Why do I actually want to look at this every month and actually understand and make sure my books are set up in a way that I know what's going on, and then I can use that to make decisions. And I use the data, but then I can also trust myself to make the decisions that I need to make. And because I do it in my own business, I can see my numbers all day, but then I also know this decision probably won't work because I just feel it. If I meet someone and I'm like, even though it could be a great opportunity, but it's just like my body's like, no, I don't want that. And even though you pass up something, you're like, oh, that would have been great for my business to bring in some money because my business needs to make
Yeah.
money. But then if you can trust yourself enough to make that right decision, something else will come around. And that has happened every single time. So something I've learned as a business owner and I've grown into is to really trust myself as the business owner, as a person, and not just what I see, because what everyone's telling you, it doesn't always apply to you. And 9 times out of 10, they don't have your experience. They're not going through the same journey. Their story is nowhere near your story. So, really trusting yourself to use the data that you have, but also just that true knowing that you have within yourself to make the right decisions for your business.
I was thinking how, in like finances, you recommend looking once a month, but that changes based on like the data you're looking at. Because one of the things that I actually don't recommend checking like your marketing for SEO once a month, because it's such a small portion of your growth. SEO goes for years. And I feel like that's I mean, even looking at across different industries, is the picture that you see in a month is so much different than you see in an entire year or a quarter. So with SEO, we have fluctuations in our seasons, fluctuations in when stuff is searchable. So if you were doing SEO right now, Misa, and you're in the financial space, you would probably have a huge uptick in traffic over the last 3 months, because that's when everybody's doing this last minute searches. They're saying, I need to get my books in order. But it could be the complete opposite for me, and my traffic might be tanking because nobody's interested in SEO right now. They're so concerned about that financial stuff. Or maybe it's a trend where everybody wants to start a podcast right now and blogging is kind of dropped off. And it was that situation probably about a year ago where everybody was like, blogging is dead and all this other kind of stuff. So it changes, and the picture that can be painted changes on the portion that you're looking at and the place that it is in. It's going to look so much different for everybody in each industry and each time frame, and even in each life cycle of the effort. I hope that makes sense. But nothing is going to look the same, and the shorter you go, almost, for my stuff, it's going to be the most concerning. So you can really scare yourself out of seeing the progress that you've made and actually how much it's impacting what you're doing and how well you're doing.
One of my favorite questions to ask when the corporate executives that I would work with was, yeah, but what question are you actually asking? Because they would always ask me for data, but guarantee you 80% of the time it was the wrong data. So I would ask, what question are you actually trying to answer? Because they would either be looking, like you were saying, Michaela, at too small of a time frame or some little proxy measure over here. I worked in healthcare, right? That's where I did all of my analytics. So, I mean, and it was specifically substance use and mental health, behavioral healthcare. That stuff fluctuates like crazy. And you get grants and all this stuff changes constantly. So asking yourself, but what am I actually trying to figure out? What do I actually want to know? And the second point I want to make is that all things are data. So I have a little saying with my daughter. It's not originally mine, but it's magic is just science we haven't explained yet. And I think the same thing about intuition. Intuition is just data that we haven't explained yet. Astrology, just data that we haven't explained yet. I work with Sherry Moyes, fantastic astrologer. She uses that for impacting launches, does an amazing job. And our conversations always come back to, it's just another data point. So like what you were saying, Misa, is that knowing in your body, that is in fact another data point. You just don't want to use any data in silos. You want to use it all together contextually. And Michaela, like you were saying, you want to put it in the larger scope of things, of what am I really looking at? So when I go into a business and I start digging into all those dusty spreadsheets, it's all about the context. It's all about, yeah, but what are we really trying to answer? And when I specialize, because I specialize in launches and memberships, right? So when I get into the membership numbers, for example, it's like, yeah, but what are your people really doing at that third month when they decide not to renew? Well, let's look at that. Let's figure out all the little pieces of the puzzle. And so it comes back to all things are data. It's just which is important to the question you're trying to answer.
I love that you said that, because I really had gone into this specific recording conversation thinking about numbers and like numerical data. But I think that you're so right. And what you were saying, Michaela, with the windows of time, it reminds me kind of somebody who's on like a weight loss journey. If you were to track your weight 4 times a day, every day, then you could make yourself depressed because your weight is going to fluctuate throughout the day, etc. Even just one day to the next day, you're not going to see it. The big difference is in a much longer term picture. And I think that the same is true for our moods, right? So you hear people talk about like if you can do journal practicing to track your mood each day, and then you can kind of look back and see a bigger picture. But even throughout the day, like just tracking your mood once on a day, especially in the last 2 months, I've had some intense mood fluctuations because of the state of things in this United States. So I feel like even just depending on when you ask me in the day, my mood is going to be different. And we can do that with energy levels. We can do that. And I think trying to quantify data helps us track change over time. It helps us track and like in a form of measurement. But yeah, I think sometimes trying to figure out how do you quantify data that is not just numerically based is tricky.
It can be really tricky, but the other piece is what Misa was saying, that feeling in your body. And Emily, and I know you want to speak as well, so I'll throw it to you. Your intuition is usually right if you are in a space to properly accept it. I say that very carefully. So I have a therapeutic background. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I say that very carefully. If you are in a negative space, don't trust that intuition. Don't do it. You walk away and you come back. But Emily, I'll throw it to you for more.
I was actually just going to say something very similar, and it's understanding yourself enough to know when you are in alignment and when you're out of alignment. And for me, like human design was a game changer for me to really understand how I make decisions. And now I know no matter how great it feels, I'm giving myself 24 to 48 hours, no questions asked. I don't make the decision right then and there. It's not like I save like literal lives. I don't work in healthcare. I don't have to worry about making that kind of decision right then and there. But what's in alignment, I've made some very huge investments because in the moment it felt so great. And then later realized, oh, I pick up energy from people. So of course I'm going to get sold every single time, right? Even though the data and everything they showed was matching, but it was not in alignment. And then a couple days later, when I come down off the high, I'm like, oh yeah, now it doesn't resonate with me. Now I don't want to do it. And so it's really understanding what is your intuition to you, because then my business partner's intuition is completely different. So just understanding everyone operates differently, and the more you can use the tools like astrology, human design to understand yourself, the better off you are.
I think that brings a great point, just because within my industry, if we think about just the accounting industry in general, most people have a very negative feeling about it, just because they're not very compassionate with people who don't understand the numbers or just understand what's happening. And it's a big problem. That's something I'm trying to work to correct as much as I can. But that also leads to part of the problem, because if a business owner doesn't have anyone that they feel comfortable and safe enough to come to ask those questions, even if they feel like it's a dumb question, there are no dumb questions. If you have a question, you need an answer. So having a place to go to actually get that question and put you on the right path, it makes such a huge difference. When I see business owners and they ask me a question and they're like, oh, I didn't understand that, or thank you for explaining that, I just help them move forward, and they didn't remain stuck, because a lot of them will just be stuck right there. They have a question, or they're like, I need to know what this means, or what is this number, or what should I look at? And there's just not enough people to help support them. And the industry as a whole is just, it's terrible. It's just terrible, because it's like, oh, well, I'm the professional. I know what I'm talking about. You don't need to worry about it. What I'm telling you is correct. And it's like, no, we are collaborators. Yes, I'm the professional. Yes, I probably have more of the knowledge, but I'm also here to support you. So if we need to sit back and you're freaking out because you think your books are a mess, or you think your business is not doing well, let's take a minute. Because I tell people all the time, I'm like, it's okay. I'm like, you think your books are a hot mess, or you think your business isn't doing well. I've seen it all. I have seen it all, and you're not alone. And I think that's also a big thing, is that we feel alone as business owners, because we don't have that support that we would have like in a corporate setting. And if you don't have people that you can go to kind of get the support you need, have that community, it's going to make it harder for you as a business owner. And so you being able to use the data and trust in ourselves, and then also having that support, when you put all of that together, your business can do amazing things. I literally have clients who are doing amazing things, and they're making a lot of money. And I think we see a lot about how, oh, small businesses aren't doing well, or this is happening and this and that. I'm like, that's not true. I see what's really happening, and the ones you should really worry about are the ones who are sitting there telling you they're making all this money, because if you look at the numbers, they're actually not. So just kind of putting all the pieces together, and then understanding that what everyone is saying, it doesn't apply to you, because unless you're looking behind the scenes and you're looking in their numbers, just ignore it. Pay no mind to what they're saying.
Having somebody else look in on what you're doing makes a heck of a difference. So we've had this rise of challenges and free things and baby offers, I would say, in the online space. And I have personally taken advantage of quite a few. And so it really has been helpful to gauge whether or not, is this actually something I'm struggling with, or have I looked at all this other stuff online and created this problem myself? Is this an issue, or is this actually maybe I just need a singular tweak and I'm okay? And for example, I did like a systems challenge not too long ago, and I was like, oh my God, my systems are a mess. It's awful. This has got to be the worst client experience ever. At least on my side, I'm like, I feel like I'm doing so many things. And going through the challenge, I was like, oh, I'm actually only doing 5 things, and it's really not a lot. And I can actually do this one thing, and that is the only thing I have to get rid of to really have a good experience for myself and my clients. And I had made it into this big old balloon that was so much harder to pop, because I felt like everybody had this ultimate experience that I was lacking in, when it wasn't actually true. When I got somebody else behind the scenes and to look at it and to say, hey, this is actually really secure and this is fine. You're doing a good job. I don't think you need to change anything. And I was like, oh, okay. That just saved me probably 2 to 3 grand from hiring someone right this second when I felt really bad about it. But that kind of leads into what I was thinking, and this is a little bit harder depending on what it is approaching, but testing and figuring out what feels good. I am almost honestly opposite of Emily in this. Like, I have tried the human design and astrology, and every time it's actually really pressuring to me because I feel like I am put into a box of having these expectations, and I almost disappoint myself when I'm like, oh, well, this is supposed to work for me, but it's not. And honestly, it's likely how I think about it because it puts me in a box, whereas probably they are really good suggestions that I can test and I can try and I can say, oh, well, this is a really good suggestion here, and I can test it and see if it works for me. And then if it doesn't, and this comes into like how we use our data, I would say, like how we're using what we're given, even with content and our investment decisions, like how our intuition, how we're feeling, how are we using this feeling that we're having, and just how we're communicating even. I feel like that kind of comes back into content, but when I'm doing research about what these search terms are, like who your audience is will determine how that keyword is used. So even though this keyword is going to stay the same no matter who researches it, if I'm using it for Misa or I'm using it for Emily or Kelsey, like it just happens to be something that their shared audience might be interested in. Who their audience is as a person would change how I use that data, like how I would write that into something else or the page, or if I would even use it at all, because even if it seems like a good idea on the surface, like it just might not apply. And with a lot of things, we do have the freedom of testing. Some tests might be hard lessons to learn, both mentally and financially. I've been there. But what we do with that information, we have a little bit of freedom because it can be lonely, but it is kind of just us. Like, we are responsible for ourselves to some degree and what we're making decisions. And I very much think, okay, that was a decision I made yesterday, but it's irreversible. But the only thing I can do is take that decision, learn from it, and say, okay, well, if I didn't feel good about that, what can I do today? And maybe write it down so I don't make that decision again, or say, okay, this was not a comfortable thing for me. What can I do to change it? And just take that additional step. And that's actually also gathering data about how you feel.
I think reflecting is just such an important part of learning. And so I'm so glad you said that. I relate so much to what you said about kind of personality assessment type tests because, and I've shared this story on the podcast before, but it's one of my favorite things to admit to people because it's just so funny looking back. So when human design first got really trendy, I heard so many online entrepreneur type people running online businesses talking about how they're manifesting generators. And of course, oh, if you were a high achieving kid in school, how's your Manny Gen online business doing and all this stuff. And so I was fully expecting when I finally ran the report, that's what I would be, of course, because that's like all these people that I have been kind of spending time with and in community with were. And I honestly didn't even really hear anybody talking about any of the others. That's just the only one that I heard people talking about. So I ran the report and I just got manifester and I cried because without even reading anything about it, my brain went on a freight train to like, I guess I can't be successful at running a business because I'm only a manifester and not a manifesting generator. Emily said in the chat, she's a manifester too. I literally had to self-coach in the shower after, you guys, I didn't know anything about human design. I didn't know anything about what a manifester was. I didn't know any of the other. Human design is actually like extremely complicated. There's so many things besides just your type, but that's all I'd heard anybody mention online, like the trendy stuff. So, and I just ran it myself. I didn't have somebody read my report. So I'm self-coaching in the shower, like, okay, actually, what this means, just from the base definition of the word, is that I would be a great CEO. And I'll just balance myself by hiring generators and whatever the other ones are, because at the time I didn't even know, right? But I was like, okay, so what I know to be true is that a balanced team is what is effective. And who better to be in a CEO role than a manifester? That seems perfect. So I was like, okay, I'm actually going to self-coach that. I feel great about my results. But the other thing I think is interesting about those kind of assessments is that it also does that thing our brains do. And this is data related. I promise I'm coming back to it. It is that we process the world around us through pattern recognition and categorization, right? So it helps with even this sense of belonging, to feel like there are other people that are in this classification with you. And of course, as we were just saying, it can also cause the opposite, where you're like, oh, I can't be part of this club, right? But then you find other people, like Emily put in the chat, and I'm like, oh, we're manifestors, so we get to be in a club together, which is so goofy. But then I think about that with astrology for sure. I'm an Aries. It's Aries season when we're recording this. Hello. So I tend to like notice when other people are Aries. I'm like, oh yeah, we're sisters, like Aries sisterhood. And same with, I'm an Enneagram 3. I'm a 3 wing 4, and I really relate with the wing most. But other Enneagram 3s in general, like, yes, like we're in a category together, right? And I think what's interesting about this, and this is kind of the can of worms I want to open up while we still have some time, is how this also lends itself to data bias. Because when our brains are processing the world around us through looking for patterns, then also the way data is collected is going to be done in a very biased way. The way we're interpreting data, who's interpreting the data, where is the data coming from? There's a lot of inherent bias. And so I want to see who wants to go there in exploring data bias.
Okay, so I'm going to jump up and down here because I said at the beginning I have pretty significant ADHD that also lends itself to jack of all trades. So I've been in too many things, and I am sort of I have a mini hyperfixation on AI training. Okay, so first, just want to say I'm a 5-1 pure generator. I had to coach myself on that too. Oh no, I'm not a Manny Gen. What does that mean for my business? So that's number one. I'm not going to make a business. Two, interesting. So about data bias, and this is the story I share all the time, and I am not the originator of this data. There's some incredible resources that I'll definitely share with Sarah, so she can put them in the show notes. But when self-driving cars were first learning their data sets, the original training data for people, what a computer will recognize as a people, is a middle-aged white man. Now you can imagine why that is, but let's think about the implications of a visual AI only recognizing a middle-aged, slim white man as a people. Highly melanined women, 60% more likely to not be recognized by the self-driving vehicle as a pedestrian. Literally life and death consequences, because our training data is not sufficiently diverse. And that statement applies to our brains. It applies to all AI. It applies to exactly what Misa was saying earlier, where you're comparing yourself to someone else's revenue, because we said revenue, not profit. If you're comparing yourself to someone else's profit, okay, I can kind of get behind that. But if you're comparing yourself to someone else's revenue, there's literally people spending $20,000, $40,000 a month on ads. They're maybe taking home $2,000. So I'm going to start this part of the conversation off with, what are you training your brain on when you go and look at your data? What training is already present in your brain that you are looking at your data through the lens of? And then again, what biases do you have when you're looking at the things around you? Because we've all got them, every single last one of us. It's either a bias against ourselves, a bias against others. There's tons of bias out there. But every single one of those biases is a lens, and they can be positive and negative, right? Like you were saying, Sarah, earlier, you've got that positive bias when you're going and looking at your data. Bias can be positive or negative, but there's a whole heck of a lot of bias when we're looking at our stuff and we're looking at other stuff.
Okay, I will pick that up because this is why I wanted to do these conversations. Like, I have so much in this brain that needs more people to talk to besides toddlers. But I feel like that bias carries over to we are seeing influenced in the space. There is a huge almost responsibility that also goes with being these people, and they've kind of, I will say, like, they've been called out more lately on places. But just these industry giants, like, that aren't, I wouldn't say they're necessarily corporate, but they are big in our spaces, who are releasing courses and releasing this and have built this trust because they've shown up as these experts and have proven their results and shown these statistics of this person did so good in this, or they have the testimonials of this does so well. Like, I enjoyed this so well. And then they go through a course and they're like, wow, this was extremely outdated. But it almost gets buried because of the overwhelming positive environment around them that they've built around them and that so many people speak to. And it comes in every industry. I could name so many right now. There's one person that I just like, I could almost fight for being so wrong, but has built such a large platform and has so many people saying, oh, well, this tool is so good and this is so good. And they've built these pillars that they stand on. It's so hard to say. It's for someone else to come in and say, hey, it's not actually accurate, because everybody has this positive bias about anything that they say, about the data points they share, about the tips they have. Like, the most annoying part is that prevents smaller businesses who do better work or have done other studies, even more diverse studies or more relevant studies. They don't get that same respect or trust or recognition because they are not this big name. They're like, well, this person hasn't done it. Why? What do you mean you've done it and you've either disproven or expanded or done it in this way? You just don't have that trust because this person has essentially pulled it all. And you're almost, I don't even know how to say, but like, you're building stairs when they've got an escalator. It's almost trying to convince somebody to walk up 5 flights of stairs or take this escalator, even if that 5 flights of stairs is going to be better for you in the end. That one's actually going to take you to the top, and that one, the escalator, is only going to take you halfway. So.
Yeah, and I think that it's a great point. And the more we go into the business space, I see some of that starting to crumble, which is kind of refreshing to see, because a lot more people are being more vocal about it. And I actually had a incidents where when I first started my spiritual journey, I was sold this very like escalator pitch, as we'll call it. Turns out it was a cult, and which took me and made me go back more into trauma, because I left the Amish cult, and basically went into a spiritual cult and didn't realize it was just a subtle shift of the way they positioned it and sold it. And this person has a huge platform. And as soon as I left that group, cut ties, all the things, all of a sudden, all these other people out of the group started coming to me like, hey, did you know that this was a cult? And like all this, but going back to kind of this data, right? In my mind and in my, like, I had the bias of, oh, this is a spiritual person. Didn't really, I felt like my intuition was right, but apparently it was another lesson for me to learn around cults. So, but it's good to see that the more we go into business, especially I've noticed a shift here recently, people are starting to highlight these businesses to say, hey, this is actually what's going on behind the scenes.
I would add in to kind of connect all of these dots together, because as a Black woman, I will say that a lot of things that are being sold or being told, it's not that easy. It's not, because I see behind the scenes of a lot of businesses, and I get to kind of get some insights into a lot of different people and things. And sometimes like, even with myself, I sit and I think, it would be lovely if I was able to get a loan from a family friend to help my business grow, or to even just get approved for a loan from a bank. And these are things that there are certain groups of people that we're just not as privileged to have certain things that will just come easily to us. So it's like this extra step that we have to take to kind of get to that place that all of these people are selling us on. And so that's why I usually try to just tell people, we need to focus on our numbers. Focus on you, what you actually need, and what you want your business to do. Because I'm like, do I need a business to be super huge and to make millions and millions of dollars? No, I don't need all of that. But I do want my business to be able to take care of me and my daughter, and to also be able to make the impact that I want to. There's things I want to accomplish and things I want to do, and I just need my business to be able to do that. It doesn't have to be this huge thing, but I need to know what, like, the actual numbers I need to hit, what's actually going to make sense for me. And then also understanding that my journey is not going to be the same as most people's journey. And so I know that. So that's part of the data that I use. I know that most likely I might have to go do some of the research myself. I might have to do some reading. I might have to go figure some things out. And I don't mind doing that because I also use that as a way to share with other people who might not have access to it. And so using that to share data as well. So I'm happy to tell people, I'm like, no, that's not what people are really doing. No, they're spending thousands upon thousands of dollars on ads. That's why they're bringing in those sales. They're not just out here showing up on social media every day. No, they're spending on ads, or they have someone, they've hired a PR company, or they've hired a marketing specialist. They've hired help. And that's the thing that we don't talk about, or let's say they don't talk about. They don't talk about the actual behind the scenes and what it's costing them to get that revenue in the door or to get what they're trying to sell you on. And so let's ignore that and let's go back and look at your numbers. What is it that you need? What is it that you need for your life? Because I always tell people, start there. What type of lifestyle do you want to have? You need to know that number. And then now you know what your business needs to do to support that. And it's not just, well, I see so and so, they say they have a 6-figure, 7-figure business. That doesn't even matter because maybe that's what they want, but it's not really what you want. And so, really, just considering where you are and also where you sit as far as, do you have privileges that others don't have? And I know for me, even though there's so many obstacles in my way, one thing that I'm very passionate about is sharing information when I can. Because for some reason, people feel like it's weird to share information. And you could probably find it on Google if you go look hard enough or take the time to read a book. The information is there. It's always been there, but most people aren't going to take the time to actually go seek it out. And so I'm like, oh, I'll tell you, it's not like this huge secret. It's there, but I'm going to make it easy for you to access it because I also want people who don't have the access to get it. Because if they get that little piece of advice or that little resource, it's going to help them and they'll probably do better. A lot of business owners can't move forward because it's like they're missing something. They they need that question answered. They need that thing. And most of the times people are like, well, yes, buy my course, or you'll need to consult with me for this fee that they can't afford, rather than just saying, hey, this is what it is. Now, if you want to go deeper, this is what I have to offer. But at least offer something up where it's not just, sure, this might be something that's useful, but it's really not useful at the end of the day.
If you saw me react, that's because I say that to my clients all the time because we're creating content for Google. And I'm like, okay, everybody has information at their fingertips. They can search it on whatever platform. They can go to ChatGPT, Perplexity. If they want to go to Google or Bing or anywhere, if they want to listen to a podcast, YouTube, information is everywhere. You cannot gatekeep information that they can grab somewhere else because that's not how we work anymore. That's not how people work anymore. People are smarter. We know, like, okay, well, I would much rather hear it from you because you're someone I trust. But if you're going to say, smack me with a DM that says you're going to have to pay a $9.97 consult, we got to do a VIP day for this, when you could just say, hey, here's a little tidbit, but if these are some offers that I could do that could support you or have it done for you or done with you so we can kind of walk this through together, then that's something else. But information is right there. You cannot withhold that and expect people to be able to find or work with you at the same level that you could, just because there's so much that both people don't know how to ask. They don't realize they don't know, or they're searching specifically for an answer. And while you might not answer it, your neighbor 2 doors down the street, your competitor might have already answered that question, because it truly is, unless it's like your specific secret sauce that you're patenting, give it. If they want to work with you, it's going to be because they trust you, or you are the person who can provide the solution. That's how I actually tier my content. We have these people up here who they don't really know what the problem is. They just know they're experiencing an issue and they need a little more awareness. And then we've got our people in the middle who are like not quite DIYers, but they want a little bit more education around it and find like some options for solutions. And then you got your people at the bottom who are like, okay, I have a problem. I kind of have an idea of what solution I want, but I don't know who I trust to solve this problem. Like, I don't know who I trust to put my money in their hands and say, okay, this is who it's going to be. And we tier our content. I tier their content that way. So you kind of journey through and reach in different places, but you can't hide that information. That's not you giving them 2 seconds or 2 minutes even of your brain or even 10 minutes is not going to prevent them from deciding to work with you. It might actually be like that aha moment that makes them want to work with you or join your program or buy your product. I feel like I detoured a little bit, but that was still good.
Just to underscore that point, Michaela, one of the phrases I love to hear is information is free, connection is key. So information is free, you just give out your information. That's not it. It's the connection with you, it's the trust with you, and it's the actual personalization. That's the actual key to what you're charging for. But also, I just want to underscore what Misa said as well. Every major social justice movement has started with sharing of information. When we talk to one another, when we share truth, when we share what's really happening in our own lives, in our own businesses, that is when change starts to happen. It's starting with women communicating more with AI. So AI is starting to learn how women communicate, what information we're looking for. It's starting with other social justice movements as well in the LGBTQIA space as well. When people become vocal and start sharing, especially when I fully recognize I sit here as a person of privilege who does not appear to be a part of the LGBTQIA population because I am married to a man, regardless of how I identify. I am light-skinned individual, regardless of what my background is. I sit in a place of privilege. So it is my responsibility and my job to share truth and information about my business so that other people can see what's happening behind the scenes and not come from a place of ridiculously overstated information and coerce them into a vision that is unattainable with what they have access to. And that's why I started this entire conversation saying that I have severe ADHD, because I have been told before that the fact that I start the conversation that way makes people who are dyslexic, who have ADHD, who are autistic, who are on the spectrum in any way say, wait a minute, she actually said that? She comes out and say it? Yeah, that's one of the first ways that I introduce myself. Because first of all, it gives me clearance to just be me. But also, I come from a place of privilege that I know that's not going to impact me to share that. And if I can make someone feel that tiny bit more comfortable, that's one more piece of data that they now have, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I love that is sort of an actionable way to put a bow on this, because I think we could just keep talking all day, but unfortunately, nobody listens to podcasts that long. So we're going to have to just continue talking. And I think that you'll hear from everybody on here again on season 3. So that is really exciting. And I definitely want to have you all back. But Emily knows because she's been on before. But I like to end all these conversations with the same question, which is it could be work related, but it does not have to be. What is something that is making you happy right now?
What's actually making me really happy right now is that, so I have a daughter and she's in high school. She is a sophomore and we're actually getting, like, so next year she'll be a junior. So we're actually preparing to enter that next phase where she will graduate high school and go off and start doing her own thing. But what's really interesting is that she is a young creative. She loves to draw. And this is interesting for me because I'm like, I'm a bookkeeper at heart. I'm a numbers person. I love numbers. So this is learning for me, like to actually experience something that I have no idea what this is about or what's going to happen or how she will turn out or where she'll go. But it's really cool to just kind of see her really come into her own. And then as a parent, me being able to support that because I know that for all of us, we've always had probably dreams and things we were interested in, but most of the time, whether it was our parents or just the world, it kind of crushed our dreams. And so, what I wanted to do as a parent is to support that for her. And so, if she wants to draw, how can we make sure that you are enjoying what you do? And then also understanding that she is not me and letting her be herself, however that is, like she is a complete opposite of me. Like, I'm like, I get stuff done. I'm like, let's do it, let's do it. She's just like, eh. And so just understand, and I let her be herself and also support her around the things that she enjoys and likes. And I have found that like our relationship is beautiful. Like usually mother-daughter relationships they can be iffy depending on how the experience is, but we have a very close and special relationship. And I'm just excited for the next phase because not only will I get to see her go out and blossom, but then I will also get to experience being an adult without her because that's something I've never experienced on my own. I had her at 19, so I know nothing about being an adult without taking care of a child. So it's just going to be a whole new transformation. And I think it's really cool because I've now built a business that I'll actually be able to put more time and energy into and really go like all the things that I can't do right now because I'm like, I have a child. Like I just have limitations. I can actually do those. So it's just going to be a very interesting transformation as we transition from her going graduating and just all of that. So that I'm really excited about that.
I will come after that because I feel like I'm almost at the beginning of that journey. Mine are 5 and younger, and what I was going to say that's making me really happy right now is that my hips hurt because I was able to go out for the first time in at least a year. I used to do it so much more often and do aerial yoga and spend an hour just doing something that I really love. Like it's gonna make me tear up in a second. I'm gonna try and wiggle away the nose tingles, but I'm in that phase where I am coming out of my second year. I'm kind of hitting that second year postpartum, so like my brain is finally coming back, and this is the first time that I have not been pregnant or breastfeeding or have an intention to have another child. We're done here, but I'm able to spend more time like doing stuff that I really enjoy. And because of the business things that I've been doing, like my husband doesn't have to work the overtime and he can spend more time with the kids and I can do this. And then we're able to have more family days. So it's been an interesting transition from full on mommy mode. I am raising a tiny little human being who requires me for sustenance and just to make sure that they are not injured in any way because they're so small and I really did have them back to back. And we're finally getting into I can go away for an hour and nobody's crying that they need a boob. And they also have like their own interest, which is a really cool thing. So my son really likes farming and my daughter is a princess and she's 3 and she wants to turn 7. That's what she said. She's turning 7 here soon. So we'll see how that works out for her. And then my youngest just turned 2 and she's forming sentences and telling me yes and no. And I don't like that. So it's like a whole new journey. And I'm very excited to be in this.
I would say the thing that's making me excited the most is business right now. I'm very excited to be in the expansion phase and partnering with different AI tools and yeah, just the growth of it.
I think for me, it's a combination of the business and my daughter. So I built this business because I want to make sure that my daughter sees breaking generational trauma. Like we're going to just come out and say it, breaking generational trauma. I want her to see that I don't have to do it all, that I'm choosing myself, but also able to choose her, that I can do things that I enjoy while still having time for her, that I can support her with doing the travel and the excursions and things like that, that not everyone is going to have, and not all of her friends are going to have that capability, and not everyone she meets is going to have that. And so she turns 4 on Sunday after we record this. So literally 4 days away from 4 years old. Michaela, she's just like your daughter. Everything is the princess dress. She wants to wear her princess dress. And she needs to be 5 because she needs to sell Girl Scout cookies. Her words, not mine. But yeah, just being able to sit with, we're doing hard stuff and it's really okay. We're doing hard stuff because we love people around us. We love ourselves. And that hard stuff is going to have really cool results.
I love all of this. This is really beautiful. I think mine is going to echo more of Emily's, which is I'm more work specific, and that although it's still community based, which is the more people that I am talking to and getting to know through Big Brave Business, the more I've started a dream hire list of wanting to hire all of you. So that's been so fun to just start being able to really build connections and collaboration opportunities with people who I think share the same priorities, the same core values. Yeah, I think that when speaking of SEO, I think like when you're just searching for somebody who does something, or kind of the people who have the biggest platforms and like the loudest platforms aren't always going to feel like good investments. They might be stretch investments. They might be really knowledgeable. They certainly are really experienced and probably talented, but people who I think entrepreneurship can feel really lonely. I guess that's really where Big Brave Business started in the first place. When my former co-host Amanda and I started season 1, is that we were so lonely in entrepreneurship until we found each other. And then we were like, oh, this is what people mean when they say a biz bestie. So we started the podcast with the intention of you can sit with us, but also just really wanted to find more people to be friends with who are also entrepreneurs. And so, yeah, I think, and then adding the to hire list back in or the dream hire list. People ask all the time in podcasting, like, who are your dream guests? And I don't know, but a dream hire list I think is really fun. These are people who I want to work with my friends. I want to collaborate with my friends. I want to refer to my friends. And having that list to keep it top of mind. These are people who, when I'm looking for a bookkeeper, I don't need to Google bookkeeping. I know bookkeepers I would love to hire, right? So, and I think it's just, that feels exciting. That feels fun. And it's bringing me joy. And I'm just so grateful for all of you. Thank you for joining me for the conversation and for immediately making something that I led off this conversation saying, hey, today we're going to actually talk about business. And so much of this ends up being kind of a ambiguous, like, justice conversation. And that is true to who I am. And I can't disconnect business from like humanity and human rights and all of the problems with corporate capitalist patriarchy. It's all just so ingrained. And so I think the more that I talk about it, the harder it is to separate. And when I find other people like you who can immediately jump into this, we all just met each other for the first time, right? And I guess Emily and I had a cheat sheet because we did one of these conversations before, but collectively this group, we just met for the first time. And in 15 minutes of introducing ourselves to each other, we were talking about some big, brave stuff. So thank you for being willing to do that and for jumping in here with me and meeting me here and meeting each other here. I really appreciate and honor that. And yeah, thank you. So thank you for being here. Excited to have you back. And for you listening, super excited to have you back as well. We will see you right here next week.